welcome to another session of the 28 Days of Tech Careers. Today we're going to be talking about software quality assurance. We have two speakers, Mia and Zainab. Mia is a senior QA engineer who's currently based in Bellevue, Washington. I believe she's working for a company called Aptio. She's been working in QA engineering for a while now, almost a decade, I see. But you've been in tech overall for over 15 years. Is that correct, Mia?
Yes, that's correct.
I'll just transition over to you and you can take over and talk about your career path. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jane, for the introduction. And I am extremely excited to be here today just to talk a little bit about QA engineering, my path into this, and more about the career experience for QA engineering overall. So let's jump right in. So a little bit about my background and how I got into QA engineering. I was first introduced to QA engineering my junior year of college at Iowa State University. I was a management information systems major. The thought of turning business and functional requirements into C++ scripts just seemed like a good fit. So I took an internship that was extremely challenging, both professionally and personally. And I knew once I completed my degree that QA could be a viable career option for me. And so after college, it took a little while before I returned to QA. I started off as a junior programmer on websites, and that was pretty short-lived. And then I went into software support technician at an insurance software company. I enjoyed doing that, and I did that for about 2 years. But of course, anyone who works with customers knows that that could be a little bit stressful, especially when you're trying to work on their technical issues on the spot in real time. But it was a great experience because I learned a lot and it helped me learn how to troubleshoot. So by the time I returned back to QA, I just had more of a passion for it. I had a larger overall picture of how I could help customers. And so it just kind of stuck with me. And that was nearly 15 years ago. Since then, I've had the pleasure of working for several different companies, Applied Systems, IBM, and I've done both manual and automation engineering at several companies. I've developed test automation scripts in several languages, as well as created test strategy for end-to-end automation. During my career, I've also functioned as a QA team lead for various projects. And I've worked more narrowly as a lead for specialty areas like accessibility compliance testing, which became a passion of mine as I did it for 5 years alongside my other test work. My work environments have included both being a team member on a centralized QA team, as well as an embedded QA on a development team. And really, throughout it all, I think my favorite part of my job is the introduction of a new product or feature. Of course, it's like receiving a new puzzle or a problem to solve, and I just can't wait to dive in and learn more about it and be an advocate for our customers. As Jane mentioned, currently I'm an embedded QA engineer at Aptio out of Bellevue, Washington, and I'm on the Studio UI development team. Aptio develops technology business management software and is a leader in that field. It really helps our customers manage their technology finances like no other software that's out there. And it's been an enjoyable experience the few months that I've been there. And so now that you know a little bit more about my QA engineering experience, let's shift our focus a bit and talk about QA engineering as a whole. Let's start with the concept of software quality. Software quality was introduced to ensure that software being released was safe, functions as expected, and was, of course, user-friendly. So to achieve this, there are 3 quality management activities: quality assurance, quality control, and testing. And these terms are often used interchangeably, but they actually refer to different aspects of the quality management process. Quality assurance is a broader term that refers to process, and it ensures that the approach, techniques, and methods used to create and manage deliverables have been followed and are operative. It focuses on preventing defects, and it involves the team, including all the stakeholders. When you shift to quality control, you're really trying to make sure the product as a whole corresponds to the requirements and specs before it's released. It's more of a reactive process, and it's the team's goal to focus on verification. Finally, testing is the activity that aims to identify and resolve technical issues in source code. This is actually the work of QA and a QA engineer. This is when you get narrowly focused on actively performing all the QA engineering roles and pieces parallel with the development process. Or if you're in a different type of environment, you may do it at a dedicated test stage. It just really depends on what kind of software development model is being used. But testing is really kind of where QA has their home base. And this is what we'll talk about a little bit more. Now, instead of focusing on the different types of software testing, meaning like unit testing, integration, different areas of functional and non-functional, I've decided to focus a little bit more on the QA engineering roles. I wanted to open this information up a little bit more to anyone who is considering getting into the field, or someone who may be in the field already and is wondering what their different options are as far as career advancement. In the quality management process, as I mentioned before, QA engineers really drive the overall testing effort required for the software release. Our goal is to ensure business requirements are met, the product functions as expected, and the user experience is intuitive and straightforward. And depending on the type of QA engineer you are, you'll probably go about this process very differently. You see here that I've split the roles into three main categories. They're manual QA engineer, automation engineer, and QA lead. Now, what's listed here is obviously not exhaustive as far as the responsibilities and skill sets, and many of the skills actually overlap. But again, this is just to offer a overall picture of different areas of QA engineering and how you can pursue and advance your career. So let's start with manual QA engineering. I typically hear a lot of people talking about starting in manual QA, but I've seen people both start in manual QA as well as transition out of it into automation and QA lead. But I've also seen people spend their entire career in QA manual testing. And really, it just depends on the person, their desires, and obviously their overall career goals. The core function of a manual QA is to evaluate the product by hand. We really rely on careful observation of the product, and you tend to see more expert level knowledge of different product areas. The skills that are required for this particular role is basic knowledge of software testing and the software development lifecycle. You have, again, a user-oriented perspective, and typically QA manual engineers are analytical, problem-solving, and excellent communicators. The responsibilities include requirement analysis, test planning, documentation, defect reporting, deploying environments, and daily status reports if you're working in an agile environment. And typically the tools are test management tools, which are just a way for QA to keep track of the actual test case and test steps, and to have a place where that information is held and viewable for everyone who needs to track the QA process. And then also defect tracking tools such as Jira. And sometimes you'll be required to do maybe some scripting using SQL or some other type of test script language. But generally, manual QA sticks to evaluating that product by hand and doing a lot of exploratory testing. So moving on to the automation QA engineer, or what many call the software developer engineer and test. This role creates automation testing frameworks and the actual testing scripts. They design automated tests to really streamline tests. Their focus is to get rid of those manual and repetitive process to really free up the entirety of QA so that more attention can be paid to other areas, whether that be like new features or exploratory testing and what have you. The skill set required for this is knowledge of programming languages. There are scripts that are written in Java and Python, and it's kind of corresponding to various test tools like Selenium, Catalan, and a few other things. SStats really need to be much more analytical and a bit more versed in problem solving than, let's say, a manual QA for certain pieces of their job function. When you're setting up a framework, you want to make sure that you're obviously using best practices for programming. You just want it to be very eloquent. For the tool selection, automation documentation, writing, executing, and monitoring test suites, those are the general responsibilities of the SDATs. And lastly, we have the QA lead. Sometimes this can be a person who doesn't have any direct reports, or it could actually be a QA manager / lead role. This person generally has many years of experience, and they have worked in both the manual and automation capacity. This helps them to create test strategy overall for the entire test effort, and they manage the workflow within the team. As I mentioned, there's a wide knowledge of testing approaches gained by this person over time because they've done QA engineering from the manual and automation perspective. And they really understand a lot more about the business and client requirements because they're typically in meetings that manual and automation engineers don't have or are not privy to. So they have a deeper understanding of what the overall business goals are. There's also project management and people coordination involved in the skill set. You're making sure that all the working pieces are in place and that people are, finishing tasks on time, and you're working to mitigate risk oftentimes. This person also really does a great job with setting quality metrics, again, because they see the overall big picture of what's trying to be accomplished for that particular company, their roadmap during that specific time, or for a specific business feature. Also, they mentor junior QA often, just to get the team all on a better platform and a better understanding of the overall QA process. The tools that they use are general management tools. That might be something like Tableau to show a little bit more about how defect management transfers into actual test case and future options for where to expand test coverage. So let's take a moment here to talk a little bit more about manual versus automation testing. And I actually don't have a slide for this because I kind of thought about it a bit more this morning as I was preparing. And I just really wanted to make a note about this because being on both the manual and automated side, there tends to be a conversation around manual testing being phased out, unfortunately. And it's been a conversation for as long as I've been in testing and probably even before that. I just want to mention that that's not really true. There is a necessity for both manual and automation. Really, there are items in software that are always going to need human verification and a human skill set, like usability testing. It's typically the go-to option if you're trying to quickly cover and verify a test area from a user perspective. Other times there are tests that are just not cost or time effective to automate, or it's not reasonable to automate. It doesn't make sense to actually automate. And so manual testing still needs to be run to provide that comfort level and the quality in these particular circumstances. And so really to avoid the conversation of us versus them attitude between manual and automation engineers, we need to recognize that we need both types of testing to complete full quality. Automation engineers provide confidence in the code base. That automation really lets us know what we've implemented and what we've changed has not broken something that we already knew to be working. It's also preferred for load testing and to help verify systems performance under load conditions. As I mentioned before, frees up time for manual testing, allowing engineers to target more exploration and pushing of boundaries within a software. Just to kind of sum it up, we really need to balance and confirm that we're automating the right things at the right time, as well as being efficient and purposeful in the time we spend manually verifying a software. That was just kind of my little side note about it. I thought about it earlier today and I wanted to share it with you all. Moving back to the slide deck, let's spend some time talking about QA's role in different environments or different models and methodologies. Here you can see, I'm talking a little bit about the waterfall model. In waterfall, testing is considered a quality gate belonging to a centralized test team. QA really owns the quality effort and are expected to test once the feature is in a stable state. I remember first being introduced to waterfall many years ago and hearing this term, or hearing this phrase rather, that once development was done, they would throw it over the wall to QA to test. And that always tickled me a bit because it just spoke to the lack of collaboration and communication between development and QA. That is more so an artifact of the past, and we are seeing even in some waterfall environments that development and QA are communicating more to achieve the quality effort. But I'm really excited that that's not the case as often anymore. And so again, in the waterfall environment, the emphasis is more on manual tests and automation. If there's a great focus on automation, it's typically about regression tests and repetitive tasks. There is a high emphasis on planning and documentation for both development and QA early on. And the documents are generally static, again, really don't change after a certain point. QA is generally clear on what they're testing in this type of model, and the defects are found, but relatively late in the development process because of when QA is expected to test. With most companies having adopted some form of the Agile methodology, QA has changed quite a bit, and in my opinion, for the better. QA engineers are now actually embedded on a development team instead of being a separate entity. And quality is not just owned by QA now, quality is owned by all of development. It's very collaborative, although QA still drives the test strategy and planning. So software development and testing in this type of environment have become iterative, incremental, and evolutionary. Development and testing are done concurrently and often continuously, and QA engineers are involved much earlier in the development process. They're able to give their feedback early on and even kind of shift the focus of some of the development features. Release cycles also are much more quick in an agile environment or much shorter, and teams are able to leverage test automation from the start, really mitigating risk around new features as well as regression testing. Documentation is not as much of a priority in this model. The shift is more so to get those completed pieces out sooner rather than spending time upfront doing a lot of documentation, detailed planning. However, planning is still obviously very important. It's just a much shorter, condensed model that's being used for that. So in this model, QA has to be very comfortable with ambiguity, especially around functionality and the overall user experience. So to mitigate this risk, excellent communication skills and practical knowledge of software design and behavior help with that. In the DevOps model that more and more companies are moving to currently, it further refines the way testing is handled. QA is now required to align test efforts within the DevOps cycle and shift to a truly continuous testing model. It's been suggested that automation must achieve anywhere from 85 to nearly 100% code coverage to actually be effective in this type of model. So we're really focusing on a lot of end-to-end automation, which would also include the test environment deployment and pre and post-testing tasks. Really with this type of environment, it creates continuity while maintaining faster development cycles. Again, the DevOps model is collaborative as well. And even QA engineers are expected to widen their skill set to complement this collaboration. So this is an exciting new opportunity for QA to really build on their skill sets and kind of get out of their comfort zone and explore things that they may have not been privy to before as far as like tech ops. So again, as I mentioned, I'm not really going to dig into the types of actual testing. I want to give an overall picture of QA engineering and just the career path, the different types of environments that you can be engineering in. And then lastly, the future of QA engineering, or as I see it, where the future of QA engineering is going. I've talked a little bit about continuous testing, but there's going to be a greater adoption of continuous testing going forward. A 2018 study by Forrester on definite software quality metrics for Agile and DevOps teams found that the teams that were successful do various things differently from their competitors. And one key differentiator is actually the adoption of continuous testing. So I really expect to see a lot more people adopt that moving forward in 2019. Shift left and shift right. There's an emphasis on both shift left and shift right, which are not new terminologies or trends in software testing, but it's the combination of both approach that seem to work for many organizations looking to leverage CD and performance testing benefits. So shift left enables early and continuous testing, while shift right addresses performance and user experience. AI and machine learning test automation. So machine learning is one of those buzz terms that's been around for a few years now. And I'm really anxiously anticipating how this is going to be used to help with test automation. So a few things that I'm kind of hearing about are test suite optimization. It helps to identify redundant and unique test case, predictive analytics. It will help to predict the key parameters of software testing process on the basis of historical data, log analytics, traceability, and defect analytics. Just really identifying high-risk areas in all of these areas by using the information that's available and by extracting things like keywords from the requirements traceability matrix to achieve test coverage. So this is a really exciting area, and I'm looking forward to more of this information being shared and actually put into implementation at various companies. Lastly, IoT testing, or Internet of Things. So there's probably about 1 trillion devices that are expected to be connected in 2025. So it really speaks to hyperconnectivity and how it's taking over the world. And with this, obviously, there's going to be an opportunity for QA to do some testing and make an impact in that area. So this includes mobile devices, wearables, embedded sensors, and also big data. It's really changing the landscape of just technology and how we test. There's a lot of new challenges in this area, and there's going to be a lot of value added as testing concepts and procedures are expanded out and begin to work in this area. So again, I'm looking forward to the future of QA engineering, the different direction that it's taking, and all the skills that QA engineers are now able to access just because of the collaboration between development, tech ops, etc. So really looking forward to the future of QA engineering, and I'm hoping that this chat has inspired some of you to pursue QA engineering or even just appreciate QA engineering a little bit more. Thanks so much for listening. And if there are any questions, let's open that up.
Mia, would you say that a QA engineer is a very detail-oriented person?
I would say so. Can you tell from my slide deck? I would say that QA is very detail-oriented. They're usually people who are pretty thorough, people who are analytical and like to solve problems, and that really can focus in and narrow in on something and just really break it down into smaller pieces in order to find out where the issues are.
Yeah, I feel like you have to consider so many different factors before, you can say, okay, this is ready to go.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest parts of QA engineering, really communicating and having a voice, and being able to say firmly, yes, this is ready to go based on everything we've done. We've done our best work, or no. There's been a lot of pushback traditionally when QA says no, but I think that I have a lot of respect for our particular field because you have to be kind of strong in your convictions.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I agree with that. And then when you were talking about manual testing versus automation, I was thinking like for automation, would that be referring to like, say, a large load balance type of automation, like you would have something that automatically tests a huge amount of data versus manually you would just test 1 or 2 cases?
Yes. So you kind of want to you want more information pouring into the system at one time, and that's not really something you can do necessarily manually or easy manually. And so most times companies will just kick off automation runs overnight, and that kind of serves twofold as covering regression and repetitive tasks, as well as some load testing.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to move to our next presenter. So thank you so much again, Mia.
Absolutely.
Our next presenter will talk about her experience with QA engineering. Her name is Zainab.
Thank you all for joining this conversation. I thank the presenter who was here before me, and she set the right expectations as well as comments about what I'm going to talk as well today. My name is Zainab Umar. I'm working as a software QA manager. Again, I'm going to talk a little bit about my career, what has influenced me to work with the testing and QA since the last many years. And I will just go on to the next slide. So this is the agenda for today. We'll start off by talking a bit about the background, how it all started for me, my QA journey, what I am doing right now, my current focus, working at ExxonMobil. And then we will discuss the various flavors of testing, the big question that I think was addressed in the earlier presentation as well that I've been hearing since I started working with QA, that is testing going away. And then at the end, we will discuss software testing as a career, and then finish up with some question and answers, if any. So my background is I have studied mathematics and stats in my high school days, and I have done my graduation in computer science in 2004. And since 2004, I have been working in different locations, in different geographical locations. As you can see from the slide, I started off working in Islamabad from Pakistan. That's where I was born. And then me and my husband, we migrated to Australia. We lived there for 6 years. I just had some slight, breaks in between due to maternity leaves, but I have been working most of my time in Australia as well, in different, companies and different technologies. Currently, I'm residing in Houston, in Texas, USA, with my husband and my 3 children. So, and still continuing on my QA journey. I would like to talk about my key strengths because I think at this stage it's really important that you understand what constitutes a QA manager. And I really like to thank again the earlier presenter because she really clarified what are the different roles and different responsibilities for different streams of QA positions. But I think one of the key strengths that I have is that I have worked in very different, diverse testing environments. So technology is one thing, but if you look at my resume, you will see that every position that I have worked on, I have a different tool set experience. So some places I have tested just APIs. Some places I have focused more on test automation, and in some positions I was focused more towards performance testing. I do have a very diverse background. The second strength, and if given an opportunity, I would really like it to be my, the core strength that I think the QA person should have are strong interpersonal and communication skills. I wasn't aware of this skill that I had, but during my first performance review was done in 2004, and my manager kind of like, I was rated above average with my communication skills at that time. And so that was the starting point where I thought this was a skill that I am definitely going to need going forward. And I think talking to different people, and especially in this position where you are not independently working on your own work, but you really have to collaborate a lot with so many different people, including project managers, including developers, business representatives, your own supervisors, that you really need to have very strong interpersonal and communication skills. There's a lot of focus in the current times on Agile. So I have done my certified Scrum Master certifications, but that's just a certificate, as we all know. Really, I have worked in environments which have followed very strict Agile practices. I do have some core strengths with Agile where I have not only worked in those environments, but I've also provided coaching, and that was outside of my job responsibilities. But as a QA manager, I have mentored, my peers and other people on the Agile journeys. Currently, I am trying to develop my leadership skills, because I have worked about 15 years in QA. Last year, I delivered a very big project at Exxon where we really had to look at different streams of work, including performance automation. And in addition to that, I had to manage and hire people who are doing the actual testing and quality assurance. So I think the core expertise that I have are setting up the right quality strategy, managing requirements and traceability. Risk analysis is something that organizations have, especially the bigger organizations, they have started focusing a lot. What is the risk if our software does not work as expected? What is the impact to our customers? What is the cost that we incur if we do not test properly and if we release to production too early? So those kind of questions have really started focusing a lot on the risk analysis. Test automation is another big thing that has changed the software QA industry altogether. It's a very big advantage that we have test automation, especially with the new tools that are available in the market. We can certainly achieve more, definitely improve the quality of products and software using test automation. Performance engineering, again, is another stream of work that has enhanced over time. Again, a lot of advancements from a tools perspective, but really it has spawned into something delivering more value to the customers rather than just getting a bunch of response times for your software, but rather we want to catch our defects or performance defects very early in the development life cycles. And in addition to that, we also want to do performance monitoring in the production environments in order to deliver high valued experience to the customers. As I said earlier, I have myself worked as tester before, so I do like to do a lot of technical mentorship to my teams and my projects, and agile coaching as well. I have trained different people who were new to testing, and what is a good starting point and how you can advance your testing practices. And lastly, skills management as well. It has been an important part of my position at Exxon. The current focus, I'm currently working at ExxonMobil in Houston. As some of you might already be aware that Texas is a big oil and gas geographical location. ExxonMobil is one of the big oil companies. We have our main office located in Houston. What you see on the picture on this slide is the energy sector. That's a small section from our campus, which is located in the north of Houston on a 38-acre field. They have a very huge business, both upstream, downstream, and as well as they have a chemicals business. So I guess this is my first experience working with a company which is more business oriented. Previously, I have worked more with technology companies or software houses. So it's a different flavor of work where you are working more from the business requirement directly, because our business users kind of like come up with projects as well as needs in order to improve their services. They require IT to provide those services to them. Exxon is also a global organization, so we have presence in all key regions in the world, including AP. We have an office in Europe. We have South America offices. And that's not only for the organization, but also my team is located in all of these different regions. So we do have a lot of collaboration and need to talk to different people from different time zones all the time. Because they have a very big business, so most of the times we are working on very large scale projects or initiatives. And I did put the word transformation because Agile is the biggest transformation that we are having currently in the company. People do want to shift towards Agile development because there's a lot of value. We want to become more customer focused in terms of IT as well as business. The team that I belong to is called Quality Engineering Team, and we do not only testing, but basically we have a bunch of different services, including test automation, performance. We do provide tool support to our business users, and then we have a group of people who assist teams and projects to organize themselves from a testing perspective. Since my time at Exxon, we are fortunate to have exposure to very new or latest tools in the market. Like, for example, for test automation, we use Tosca, which has made the life of a test automation specialist very easy because it is less code intensive and it is better maintenance friendly. So, and similarly for performance, we do have access to software or tools which can help us achieve more by putting in lesser effort and provide more value to our customers. So that's my current focus at Exxon. I'm going to talk about the different flavors of testing. I do believe that it all starts with the right testing strategy, and that test strategy really comes from your customers or your business, whatever they are seeking. Sometimes they might just be seeking help with performance, or they might be needing help with automation, or sometimes they need everything, right? So they need you to come in and help them establish the right direction for them so that they can achieve their goals, their quality objectives. Risk management, as we know, is, and as I discussed earlier, has become a really important discussion point at Exxon, because we have started talking or asking ourselves these questions: that what happens if we release this to production too early, or if we do not do adequate testing, or what is the cost of the defect if it slips into production? What is the risk associated? What are the costs associated? What are the customers that we are going to lose? I listened to some very interesting conversations based on these risk discussions, that, if you have a happy customer, then he's probably going to tell others about his experience, his or her experience, very, very few other people. But if someone has a bad experience working with you, they are probably going to tell double the amount of people. So you really need to have a customer-centric approach, or risk management, in order to deliver, value to your customers, that they want to come again to you, and you have a good net promoter scoring. Test management is another kind of flavor where you need to have a good set of organized test cases, whether they be manual or automated, but you need to have governance in your test management system. In Agile, sometimes we do talk about very less documentation, but certainly at Exxon, we have kind of set our expectations to be somewhat minimal. Documentation still needs to be delivered, and that you need to have a basic level of test cases, because I have been explaining this to my customers all the time, that a test case does not only serve a purpose of a test case, but it is kind of like, it does serve a purpose of your technical specifications. What was the actual output that was delivered as a result of your requirements? Because you're not creating any lengthy documentation, so at least write some core test cases that someone might be able to reference back in future. And your teams who belong to performance or automation, when they're ready to start off, they do have a good starting point, because it's not a lot of work to capture these details. Test automation, as I said, is another important phrase that is going on in the QA industry at the moment. Without test automation, I believe we cannot do a lot of agile development, because regression is certainly not possible without having some level of test automation. Performance engineering and monitoring. I said monitoring here as well, because in addition to testing in the acceptance environments, you do want to test in production as well. Basically, you need to there are tools available in the market which set up your agents or your software that track your user experiences and your user activity, that can help you automate more and basically be more kind of upfront about your defects, rather than someone else identifying your bug. We know the buzzword, the shift left, is kind of a very important principle that's getting more popularity, and people are understanding more value for shift left in the software development industry. And there's others as well, including usability testing, especially if you have a customer facing website, or if you have your customers are not going to come back to you if usability is not embedded in your software experience for the customers. There's a big stream of work that needs to happen from a usability testing as well. Security testing, big corporations like Exxon, security is kind of like a big thing, so we do make sure that our security testing is embedded in our overall testing strategy. And these are just a few. I'm pretty sure there are other lines of testing or other flavors of testing, but I'm just talking about the ones that I have focused on in my past experience. I did want to mention a side note on this risk management. Again, talking about that because I think it's a very important area. The tool that we're using, Tosca, is they do believe in the 80-20 rule, which basically means that 80% of your risk coverage is 80% of your risk is covered if you do 20% of your test as automated. So basically, whatever are the critical test scenarios, if you identify them precisely and you automate them, then basically there's a chance that you can cover 80% of your risk. That's what the Tosca tool believes. And they do have a tool support that lets you basically do some calculations using the tool itself and find out what is your risk analysis for your software. Going on to the next slide. So the question that I have heard a lot from my past is testing going away. Whenever I kind of hear this question, then I go back to hear what the industry leaders are saying about this. And every big tech giant that you see, they do invest a lot of money in their testing. For example, Amazon releases to production every 11 seconds. That was in 2007. Now I think it's every 9 seconds they release to production. So can they afford to slip a defect into production? What's the impact to their customers? And how can they actually release to production if they do not have the right tools or right amount of testing done to their software? What is the cost if there's a defect in their production system? What is the cost to them? Google also, when you study them, you find that they have an aggressive 4-stage testing process that happens for their search engine. There's an internal round of testing. They do have separate roles for tester in their team. They do get a lot of feedback from crowd testing practices. They do dog fooding, which is kind of like involving their own users, their own employees for testing or providing feedback. And then they do release to a smaller group of their production users in the form of beta tests. So you can see that they do a lot of layers of testing before they release to production. Spotify, again, they have different flavors. They have different dedicated testers in different groups. The comment that I read from their test manager was that I think we will spend as much time on testing tomorrow as we do today, but the tools and information we will have and get from our automation will make our testing jobs very different. That pretty much sums it up, that testing has really grown into a different flavor. We do have different tools and skill set that we require from a testing perspective, but certainly none of the companies, the bigger companies that we look up, have basically abandoned testing as of now. Facebook uses a very aggressive shift left approach where they expect their developers to test their own code. Basically, the developers have tested their own code, then they do release to production, and they kind of have various stages of testing, which is done by their employees or partners. At the end of the day, they either get rid of their features altogether or they improve their features based on the value that they get from their customers. Microsoft they employ test developers as well as testers in separate roles. And they do emphasize a lot on high quality software because they understand that it's a very competitive market. They cannot afford to have software which is sort of good or excellent quality, because there are competitors for all of their products that are out there. So for customer retention and getting new customers, they do understand what's the value in having high quality software. So software testing as a career, why do we want to have testing as a career? What has kept me going for the last 15 years? One thing is for sure, that there's not a single boring day if you're associated with testing. Every time you are either talking to people, you are testing, you are not working in silos. Definitely, you need to have a lot of interpersonal and good communication skills. The second point, I think, is something that I'm really proud of as a tester, that people think that if you're a tester, you do not need technical skills, which I think is a very wrong statement, because at times I have found myself to be more technically strong than some of the developers in order to test effectively. Because if you're trying to find bugs in someone else's work, you really need to have a very analytical mindset, and you need to be able to go into, back into the weeds to basically find out what happens if I do this, what happens if I do that, what happens if the database doesn't work with the APIs, or the APIs, they do not respond timely to your user interface. So you really need to have good technical expertise if you want to become a software tester. So I think testers are given more authority to make decisions and effectively perform their roles, because at the end of the day, your project managers or your business representatives, they're kind of like relying on you to say, yes, go or no go, because I think, yes, I feel confident that the software is of good quality, or no, I don't think you should release it into production, because you are kind of like becoming an advisor to whoever is taking the decision to release into production or the acceptance environment. I do believe there's a lot of autonomy that we have in our roles. Other non-boring aspect of software testing as a career is the different streams of testing. So for example, if you start off as a manual tester, kind of you want to advance more, there's a next level you can become more immersed into automation. If you think that automation is something that you have gained enough expertise on, then certainly you can jump into performance testing, usability. You can do more of exploratory testing. You can define how you can automate more of your end-to-end scenarios using the tools and technologies that are available in the market. So certainly, there are different streams of testing that get yourself into if you want to switch your field. The future technological advances require more testing efforts. So for example, people are all the time, they are requesting for faster response times. They are seeking more and more faster deployments to production. They want to work in agile teams. So how is all of this possible if you do not have a good testing strategy, if you do not have the tools to support you? So if your developers are developing at a very fast pace, but there's no quality in your software, then what's the point of that speed? So you really need to have a good balance. I'm a keen believer in the fact that you cannot go ahead with your value to the customers if testing, and it doesn't matter who tests it, whether it's manual tester, if it's an automation engineer, or it's the developer. At the end of the day, there needs to be some sort of testing that needs to happen before you are confident that you are delivering value to your customers. And at the end, I will share this in the chat later, but this is an interesting article that I was reading earlier this week, why I moved from programming to a software testing career. This is an interesting read for people who think that testing is a boring job and only the developers kind of like, they only have the right careers, but I think it's a good read. That's all my presentation. And I apologize again for my bad voice today. Does anyone have any questions at this stage?
Oh, thank you so much, Zainab. Thank you for your dedication. We really appreciate that. And I like what you talked about, the skill sets, moving from a different role into testing engineer.
Exactly. Yes.
We're going to wrap up the call right now. So thank you so much again to Mia and Zainab for presenting on the topic of QA engineering. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.